Hi everyone, I'm Mara Webster with SAG-AFTRA Foundation, and we are here today for another one of our conversations at home. So thank you so much for tuning in and joining us once again. As a continued reminder, we are raising funds for our COVID-19 fund, which is supporting SAG-AFTRA members who are currently out of work due to all of the closed film and television productions. So please check out the link below this video and consider supporting if you're able to in any way. Today we're incredibly fortunate to be joined by Eva Longoria, who is, an incredibly accomplished actress, writer, director, producer, and activist. I wanted to start by just asking you about the way in which the shutdown has affected you, because obviously you're always working on so many different projects at so many different stages, and how it's forced you to kind of work differently and come up with different creative solutions.
Well, stopping production, there's no creative way around that. And that's why I really agreed to do this, because there's so many people from our industry out of work, from all over, from across all industries out of work. But, when you work with crews, you become family. And so, so many people, from boom operators to production designers to the dry cleaners, there's so many, to craft services. There's so many businesses associated with entertainment, and it's a domino effect when something like this happens. The last time I remember this was when the writer's strike happened. And so many people, had to stop working until the writers, it came back. And so, for me, I've been in development with 2 feature scripts that I am directing, and so we are actually in rewrites. We were okay. We weren't in production. We weren't in pre-production. We were in the writing phase, in the rewrite phase, and so it's given the writers a little bit more time to polish what they we're doing, and hopefully these scripts will be ready to go the minute we're greenlit, not only as a country, but as an industry.
I actually wanted to ask you about one of those projects with Flamin' Hot, because I loved the way that you were talking about when you were pitching to direct for that film, and you had to go through about 5 different rounds of walking into the room. So I was kind of curious how you developed that process during each pitch, and kind of the way that you shifted from walking into a room saying, I'm thinking about doing the scene this way, to I'm going to direct the scene this way, which I thought was a fascinating way to approach it.
Yeah, I'm really lucky to have some amazing mentors around me and some amazing people in the industry. Mark Cherry being one of them. He's always supported me as a director. And Brian Tannen, who created Grand Hotel, and he was a showrunner, big writer, and I was practice pitching with him, and he's the one that said, you got to stop right there. He said, put your male privilege pants on and stop asking to do this movie, and you walk in the room as if that movie's yours and you are directing it, and this is how you're going to cast it, and this is how you're going to shoot it. And I thought, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm not a man, and I'm not white, and so I would never I wouldn't think to do that. And it really, it was a change in approach to every sentence that came out of my mouth. Because as a woman, we tend to go, we want to be amenable, and we want to be cooperative. We want to be seen as cooperative. We want to be seen as, collaborative. And I want to deliver the movie you guys want to do. And he said, no, you do the movie you want to do. And it was really great to for someone to give you permission to do that. And I had never really, wanted to have that, seek that permission. I didn't know it was possible. And then I thought, I give myself permission to be that person. And then I, the other side of that coin was I was incredibly passionate about this project, incredibly passionate. And I said, nobody else can direct it. Nobody else can direct this movie but me. And I have to be that director. And so really changing your mindset in your approach to a job.
Yeah, I wanted to jump back to Desperate Housewives just briefly, because you were mentioning Mark Cherry and the way that you really viewed being on that show for 8 seasons as kind of an unofficial film school training ground. And if it was something where at the time you were aware of that and you were proactively asking a lot of questions about what was happening behind the camera and in pre-production and in those rooms that you weren't necessarily in at the point, so that when you stepped into that role for the first time, you had really grasped a full understanding of it all.
Yeah, I am a curious person by nature. And so when I was when I was an extra, when I moved to Hollywood 20 years ago, I was an extra And I was so curious. I would always be on set and I'd be asking questions. What's a mark? What's that? What is me? What is checking the gate? Why do you do that thing before everything? And why? And they were like, can somebody move the extra back to holding? Like this chick keeps bugging us. And I talked to the camera guy, and I talked to the boom guy, and I talked to the focus puller, and I talked to the lighting people, and I talked to the grips, and I just wanted to know everything. And I carried that with me throughout my career. When I started Desperate Housewives, I was even more curious. And every time we had a different director, I'm like, isn't this weird? Like, you just jump from show to show. So how does that work? What do you do? Why do you do that? Why is TV like that? And I just ask a million questions. I'm the kid that's always like, but why? But why? But why? and Housewives was an amazing learning, teaching ground for me. I mean, I had so many amazing people there that came through Housewives, whether it was a director or crew members or writers. It was so awesome to have experienced a decade of my life of these talented people.
Yeah. And when you were there, that was also when you were taking your master's degree and your thesis that was in the lack of Latinas working in the STEM industry and having opportunities. And I was really curious in how that specific study has infiltrated your work within the entertainment industry, from just understanding the very common issues which are happening across multiple different industries and businesses.
Yeah, I mean, a lack of female representation in positions of leadership across industries, whether you're in the tech field, whether you're in Hollywood, whether you're in government. We need more women at the table and making decisions for us and from us. And so, I did my master's in Latinas in the STEM field, lack of Latinas in STEM fields, because that was a space in which there was not a lot of studies done. And so when you think about doing a thesis, you want to contribute to the literature, and you want to contribute to the academic work that is available for people to learn from. And so that was a big white space that hadn't been studied a lot. And so I wanted to contribute in any way. I actually went in wanting to do my thesis on immigration, and of the 21 people in my cohort, 20 were doing the thesis on immigration. So I was like, okay, well, that's probably going to be well covered, And I said, well, how can I contribute in a effective way? And that's why I chose that.
Yeah. And then one of the other things when you were working on Desperate Housewives with Mark Cherry is that, I love the way that it sounds like he's so specific about his vision and how he wants everything to be. And there's a rehearsal process before every scene, so everybody knows where they are for the whole day. And how did that really influence the way that you then worked on a show like Devious Mage, which you were producing with him, and the way that you were approaching everything from that side of things yourself?
Yeah, it was so much fun to do Devious Maids with Mark right after Desperate, because I knew his voice and I knew his style, and he's a genius. He was really a comedic genius, and he was very specific with the lines and the delivery of the lines and the rhythm of the lines, and why this was important and why this was needed to be said this way. And I trusted him completely. I mean, I came from the camp of Mark Cherry. He taught me everything I know about comedy. And so I working with him as a director and a producer was so much fun, because we did have a shorthand with what he wanted. And, it was really easy to know.
Yeah. And then I know in terms of when you were making telenovela, that kind of going to that comedy side of things, that Chuck Lorre was someone that you kind of sought out and talked to in a lot of advice. And I was curious about what some of the things that you really took away from those conversations were, and also just the way that you carried that through into other projects and just seeking out people with their experience to really borrow from it.
Yeah, well, it's so true. I'm like, I go to the source. I'm like, there's so many brilliant people that in this industry, and I want to learn from them. And with telenovela, I had a great conversation with Chuck Lorre, because he's, king of comedy. And I remember him telling me we couldn't find a title for the show. And he said, it's such a great concept because it's simple. Comedy has to be simple. And with the title of the show, it always has to be a noun. He said, a comedy must be a noun. It has Friends, Moms, Big Bang Theory. It's, and I was like, oh my gosh, if you look at the great comedies, they're all nouns. They're not a feeling, the title's not a proverb, and so I was like, yeah, that's actually, that works. And so to call the show telenovela was absolute genius. And I love that title. I always love that title. And then when I was pitching Hot Cheeto, when I was getting my pitch together to go into Searchlight to pitch for the movie, I called Ron Howard because that was the type of movie I want to make. I want to make a biopic that is not formulaic. I love how he explores a deeper theme. And so for me, I wasn't going to make a movie about the hot Cheeto. I wanted to make a movie about the man who had an amazing life, who happened to invent this, the greatest snack in the world, the number one snack in the world. And so Ron really helped me figure that out. You know, when he did Cinderella Man, he didn't want to make a boxing movie. He said, I wanted to explore the Great Depression and why, when America was on its feet, this boxer, brought them off their knees in a time where they needed a hero. And so he wanted to explore those themes during the Great Depression. I said, oh yeah, when he did, the race car movie, what was that one?
Oh my gosh.
Why am I spelling? Rush. When he did Rush, he goes, I didn't want to do a racing movie. He wanted to do a movie about two enemies who fueled each other to be the best that they could be. He thought that was a fascinating theme to explore. And so when he did A Beautiful Mind, he thought, wow, I want to explore the mind of this man. I don't want to make a movie about a mathematician. Nobody wants to know about math. And so that really helped me dig into what was this movie going to be about. And so he was amazing. He sat down with me. He told me many things, and I'm still greatly appreciative of it.
Yeah. Diving back into the comedy side of things a little bit more, I wanted to also ask about it in terms of as an actor and as a performer, because you've done so many different types of comedy, and physical comedy has like a very different approach to it and a different thought process and kind of figuring out what's going to land. So how do you kind of prepare and navigate depending on what the style and the tone is?
Well, it all starts in the writing. I mean, we were really lucky in telenovela to have had Chrissy and Jess write this amazing, Goldstein and Petros, we call them Goldstein and Petros. The physical comedy was on the page. So I didn't like, oh, this would be great if I just came up with this amazing physical comedy. Like, it was on the page, and that's a lot. That comedy has everything to do with the writing. I mean, you can have your Jim Carrey and Will Ferrell make it into something else, but for the most part, that stuff's on the page. And so navigating comedy, you just have to have not only great showrunners for TV shows, but a great room of writers where they're just bouncing these things, these jokes, and what about this? What about that? What about that? I directed my first multicam this past year for Netflix. And those writers were so amazing because they were the expanding universe of Ashley Garcia. And they just were like, what about this? What about that? I mean, they just want to try everything. And it was such a fun experience for me in a different medium.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you a little bit actually about, coming in and directing an episode of, a show, such as when you came into something like Jane the Virgin, that's already in existence, and how that's a different experience, and how you really navigate stepping into somewhere that has a very clear, creative voice and has a rhythm and flow happening on set already that you're coming into from the outside.
It's a lot easier to come in to a show like Jane the Virgin, who's run by Jenny Snyder, who is very specific. And I remember before I went in, they were like, she's a hard one. She's a hard one. And when I met her, I was blissfully surprised that she was specific and she knew what she wanted out of each episode. And that's a blessing for a director who comes in, because I actually have directed TV where they don't know what the show is. They don't even know what the style is with the cameras, and I'm like, are we handheld? Are we on dolly? Like, what? You tell me. And they didn't know, and so you got to find your footing and with a crew that you've never worked with, and that to me is a lot harder. When I directed Blackish, Kenya Barris knows exactly what he wants. He knows how he wants it shot. He knows how he wants it delivered. Jenny Snyder and Jane the Virgin, Mark Cherry and Devious Maids, these great showrunners and writers. When you come in as a visiting director, it's a dream. It's a dream. I love it. Tell me what you want and I'm going to deliver it. Where in the film side, you get to create it,
Yeah. And then you've also, outside of narrative, jumped into documentary form. And I wanted to ask you about that process in, being behind a film like Food Chains and working in the nonfiction space, and what some of the new challenges were and the new things that you had to learn and navigate coming into it.
Well, I've directed one documentary, and it was for the census. Oh my gosh, so that was 10 years ago, because the census is here. And that was a lot of fun, just researching. I'm directing a new documentary actually right now, going through archival footage. It's a totally different approach because you don't know what you're gonna get. And so with documentary filmmaking, you've gotta get all the information and you find it in editing. I mean, it's really, really different. You can search for certain themes, but for this new documentary, I mean, I know the theme I want to explore, so I'm searching the archival footage to support that, but I'm also running into stuff that I'm like, what is that? And then you take a left turn. And so when you see that something like a docuseries like Tiger King, they shot so much, so long that you go, wow, that editing team needs an Emmy, because I'm sure they found that series, and how you break it up into episodes and how you leave a cliffhanger and how you want to make it a page turner. Oh, I mean, documentary filmmaking is all in the editing room. And so you need a really good editor. And so that approach is totally different for sure.
Yeah. I also really love the way that you've taken documentary filmmaking and your activism and kind of combined those two spaces together. And something like Food Chains is an example, which is really, supporting and advocating and giving a voice to farm workers' rights, which is something which you still kind of speak to this day. And the way in which you have found those causes that have been really important to you, and that you ensure that that's a thread that you continue throughout your career.
Yeah, I gravitate to real life. I actually don't read fiction, probably because I have to read so many scripts. But when I read a book, it's always a memoir. It's a self-help. It's, Constitution for Dummies. So for me, it's definitely, I like searching for the truth. And that's probably why I love documentaries, but also in the shows that I produce and direct, there's, this is a true story of so-and-so, or this was based on a true events, and and I love that. I really like to, bring the art form of storytelling from the actual source of who it happened. There's so many characters that you couldn't write. Like, you couldn't have written that Tiger King. You couldn't have written that character that crazy. People will go, oh, okay, that guy doesn't exist. And you're like, no, it does. Same thing with, I'm developing a movie at HBO about the first Mexican-American lawyer who argued in front of the Supreme Court in 1954, Gus Garcia. And that story, that character, Gus Garcia being a real person who actually went through events, you couldn't have written it. It's so amazing and crazy at the same time that you're like, wow, he was first of all, he was gorgeous. And you're like, okay, they're going to cast somebody gorgeous. You're like, no, he was so handsome. He spoke perfect English, perfect Spanish. He went through all this stuff. He was an alcoholic. He was self-destructive. He was so many things, and it's hard to actually create those characters. So to find them in real life is much more interesting to me.
Yeah, and it feels like since you set up your production company, Unbelievable Entertainment, you've had a really clear idea and a clear voice of the types of stories that you wanted to tell from the beginning. And I was curious if that was something that you kind of sat back and created a manifesto and an idea, or whether those were just the projects that you gravitated towards.
I think both. I mean, once I was in a position of power, I said, I'm going to bring more Hispanics in front of and behind the camera. Like, that's been my mission statement. That's what I want to do. Those are the stories I want to tell. And then a lot of them just fell in my lap. I mean, a lot of them, I was like, oh my gosh, this is an amazing story. Let's go do it. So I think it was a little bit of both.
Yeah. And you've also spoken a little bit in the past about how early in your career, you didn't really feel that you had that autonomy of your career and that you weren't reaching your full potential as an actor. And I was curious in kind of the way and the point in your career where you started to feel that shifting through all these other roles that you've taken on for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I started producing, because as an actor, you feel like you just show up, you stand on your mark, you say lines that were written for you. You don't have a choice in the co-star that you're starring opposite of. You don't get to pick which take they're going to use. You don't get to decide the music that's going to lay under this. You don't get to decide the marketing of the poster. I mean, you have zero control as an actor. And I kept going, who are those people over there behind the monitors? And that's when I really had an interest in producing and directing, mostly because I'm bossy.
And was there a specific point in your career where you started to feel like you were at that point where you could say no to projects? Because obviously when you're starting out, particularly as an actor, you really have to just say yes to every opportunity that comes your way to get your foot in the door. And what was the point at which you felt that shift?
Yeah, definitely after Housewives. I mean, I remember the day I auditioned for Housewives, I had 9 auditions in pilot season. Mm-hmm. And I was changing in my car, driving from audition to audition for nurse, and then hooker, and then this. And then, I mean, I was like changing, and not thinking like, I don't want to play a hooker. I was like, I got a job, I'll play the hooker, so you don't have a choice when you're starting out. You need experience, you need to get the tape, you need to get, these to show people what you can do. And so Desperate Housewives was the last audition of that day. It was the 9th one. I hadn't read the script, and I was exhausted. I just read my sides because that's all I could time for. And I remember walking in, and Mark Jerry goes, so what'd you think of the script? And I was like, what? Nobody ever asks me that. Like, they're like, next, nobody has a conversation with you. And I was like, oh, I hadn't read it. And I luckily I was honest. And I said, you know what? I didn't read the script. Okay. I read my part, and my part's great. He said, I knew she had the part of Gabri Solis just because that was such a selfish thing to do, was just read her part. And she was a selfish actress.
Well, I know you have to jump in a second to feed your kids, so I just wanted to finish by asking one of the questions that we solicited from our members. And are there moments where you ever still pause and doubt yourself for a moment in your career? And if so, how do you reconcile and move past this, which is from Sarah?
Oh my gosh, all the time. Every time I'm about to direct something new, I have butterflies in my stomach the night before. I go, they're going to realize I don't know what I'm doing. Oh my God, somebody's going to be mean to me. Like, absolutely. I use that fear as fuel, but every time I walk on a set, for sure, I feel scared. And even in acting, I mean, Andy Garcia and I have played husband and wife in too many times that I can count. And we just did something together again, and I still get butterflies in my stomach when I'm acting opposite Andy Garcia, because it's fucking Andy Garcia. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and we're friends, and we have dinner, and we hang out, but like, I still go, oh my gosh, I'm in front of Andy Garcia. So I think it's a great thing to still have that fear a little bit.
Yeah, that's so wonderful to hear still at this point in your career. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk about all of these things today. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, and good luck with everything. And to all of our members, hang in there. This is going to be over soon, and hopefully we'll all be working very, very soon again.